Good morning, TCCA. This is an exciting time. I am Eric Levels. I am the Director of Digital Learning for Aldine ISD, and I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing two wonderful ladies before you today. Elizabeth Clark is a fourth year teacher with a passion for integrating technology in the classroom. This is her third year teaching kindergarten, and she supported her team through the transition into distance and virtual learning. She believes that kindergartners are capable of more than what others assume. Ms. Clark has experienced her students take ownership of their learning through technology, and they love it. If you have any questions or concerns, please post them in the chat box. My co-host, and y'all see it, Tashika McKinney. Come on, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She'll be monitoring the chat for us today, and we'll be providing those discussion points at the end of the session that you post there. So please join me in digitally turning our focus to Elizabeth Clark as she shares how kindergartens or how kinders flip over FlipGrid. All right. Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Levels. Yes, my name is Elizabeth Clark, and I am a fourth year teacher. I teach at Gardens Elementary in Pasadena ISD. This is my third year at Gardens, and I'm super excited being there. They supported me through this, and so that's super awesome. My Twitter is at Miss E_Clark, and you can follow the hashtag KinderCan. I try to add that to all my Twitters because I do believe that kinders are capable of things that even third graders can do, just on a different level. If you're joining in on this session, I suggest maybe having a second device available because towards the end of our presentation today, we will be talking through the steps to create a FlipGrid that you could possibly even use in your classroom next week or even coming into the next month. Our goals here today are looking at a new platform that can give all of your students a voice in your classroom, whether they are face-to-face with you or even virtually, to discover FlipGrid and how it can be used even with our youngest learners. Again, I teach kindergarten, and I have been using it with my kiddos. How FlipGrid provides the opportunity to use academic language. At my campus, it's super important that kiddos are learning that academic language and using that academic language. We all say all students are academic learners, even if they're speaking English. And then in saving time for documenting student responses, I know for me, a lot of our responses in kindergarten are oral. And sometimes it's a little difficult to get a piece of paper and write things down super quick and make sure you're getting every word that that kiddo is saying. So using FlipGrid is a great way to have that documentation, and you could pull it up real quick if you need to write it down for a meeting about that kiddo. And then also leaving the session with tips and tricks to apply even on Monday. By the end of this session, you will know why I use FlipGrid and why it's great even for kindergarten students, how to create a FlipGrid and assign it to your kiddos. And by the end of the presentation, you'll have some tricks and tips to use so that you will not look like my friend over here who is going super crazy over the computer, which I know we all are right now because we're all at different places. We're in different districts, and some districts have asynchronous learning and synchronous learning. Some of us are balancing virtual kiddos and face-to-face kiddos like myself. I have a classroom full of kiddos, but then I also have virtual kiddos that I am supporting. And so that can be super crazy. Being new to education, we definitely didn't learn this in college, how to balance virtual and face-to-face kiddos. So trying to relieve that stress and just having a good platform or something new to use in your classroom to help with stress and things like that. Again, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we will moderate those throughout. One of our biggest things as teachers is, okay, so how does this apply to the TEKS? What standards or objectives does this either application or this project, how does it accomplish our TEKS? Being new to education, or even people who are newer to education, maybe didn't know that we actually have technology application TEKS. So we're kind of supposed to incorporate technology into our classroom, and we're kind of like a computer teacher as well as a academic teacher with our reading and our math. So our objective of using FlipGrid is increasing the academic language and oral language, which is especially important for our young students. When they have an oral language gap, they're going to struggle with their reading and their writing. So really building that foundation of oral language and using those academic words in our young students will really help them when they get to the higher grades, and then also our ESL students. So they're trying to acquire their English language, and so that's super important in the younger grades, so that when they make that transition into a gen ed classroom, from being on my campus, we have bilingual classes and then gen ed. So when they're making that transition and exiting out of that ESL program, having them have that practice of using those oral skills in English is super important. So we have our technology apps, they're reinforcing using that oral language. Reading, of course, we have oral language. We also have even like the smallest of academic vocabulary, like in kindergarten, we have characters, setting, okay? We teach those vocabulary words in isolation, and then we have the kids use them in a sentence. So we really want to focus on the kids using complete sentences. So if I ask the student, okay, who are the characters in the story? They're answering in the characters are. It's a very simple sentence, but it really impacts the kiddos in the long run. Then you can start adding on character traits and things like that to describe the characters as you're moving on into more advanced skills. Math, you have oral communication, and you really have that super big academic vocabulary, like the words compare in kindergarten. So we're comparing numbers. We're looking at them whether they're more than or less than. We do compose and decompose, okay? I was teaching my kids, compose is a really big word. So when we compose, we're putting numbers together, okay? We're kind of like building Legos. We're putting it together. And decomposing, okay? It's breaking apart. It's becoming smaller, okay? And then also, like, if you think when they're a little bit older, when they're getting to the word compose or composing and decomposing in science, it means something a little different. So teaching them what it means differently. So how are they different? Again, using that mathematical language and that oral communication. And then our ELPs, especially in speaking, so they're responding orally. Again, back to our documentation, if you have a recorded response from a student, you can go back when you're trying to do your TELPAS in the spring, and you're like, okay, so how did they perform in the fall to how are they performing now in the spring? And you're able, especially in K&1, we do holistic TELPAS, so we're just doing by the overall student. We don't have written responses for TELPAS, so you're kind of able to look back and see how were they at the beginning and how were they at the end when you're filling out that TELPAS. So here's our, I like to call it our myths busted. I know for me, when I first was introduced to FlipGrid, actually through my school district, I was in a cadre, a little group of educators that were learning different technology applications to use to help our kids be academic language learners. And my first thoughts when I saw FlipGrid were, my kids are too young, and this is going to be too hard for them to to do. So, because they were showing me some things, and I'm like, my kids aren't going to be able to log in with an email address. Like, they don't know how to do that. But as I was going through FlipGrid and like discovering it on my own, I was noticing different things that we could use to make it a little bit easier for my kiddos to be able to use FlipGrid. So actually, these are examples of my kiddos using FlipGrid. Again, yes, they are 5. We're in October, almost November. And so, yes, they do need a lot of teacher support and teacher guidance at the very beginning. But I already have some kiddos that already know the steps of using FlipGrid and where to click and where to go. So in this video, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear it, but so this little girl in my class, she is retelling a story. So this is showing a reading teak of retell in kindergarten. We read a story and I brought her over and I was like, hey, can you retell me the story? So stories have a lot of parts. So I'm not going to be able to remember everything that she was telling me. So I assigned her a FlipGrid and we recorded it while we were talking through it. And then again, also in math, we were defining the words compose and decompose. So I could really see if my kids understood what those terms mean before we were actually doing the actual activity. So in this video that I had on here, the little boy, I asked him, well, what does it mean to compose? And so he was telling me compose means to put things together. And I'm like, okay, so now what does it mean to decompose? And he's like, it means to break them apart. And I was like, awesome, you know what compose and decompose mean, so I can check that off and that you understand what those two terms mean. So just kind of again, why I use FlipGrid. It allows students the opportunity to show their understanding of academic vocabulary, like the little boy was telling me, compose and decompose. It allows them to use it in a safe and structured environment. Some kids are super shy and they don't want to speak up in class, or they don't want to say something wrong, or even our speech kids, like they're super quiet and they don't want to speak up in class. So giving them a FlipGrid is giving them an environment that they can practice, or even just practice doing a FlipGrid, and then later they might want to start warming up and talking in whole group because they've already practiced it, and so they already know they did good, and so that gives them the confidence to want to start talking in class, and also practicing that oral language and those complete sentences, which is super important, especially for the speech kiddos, on top of being in kindergarten. Providing oral response over written. So many times we get caught up in oh, you got to write that down. You got to write it in a sentence. Okay, so step back for a minute and think, can I just take an oral response and know that you understand the concept over a written response when I know you're not quite at that level yet to write? And then having documentation of student understanding. And then this one I think is really awesome, especially when you have virtual and face-to-face kiddos. It allows for a virtual discussion or turn-in talk. When you go into FlipGrid and kids sign on and they do their assignment or their response, they're able to click on their friends' responses and watch them, and then listen to their friends' responses, and then they can actually record a response back to their friends. A lot of platforms, they allow the kids to respond to each other, but it makes them type it. And when they're 5, they're not quite at or in kindergarten level, or even in any other grade level. You might have kiddos that have that gap to where they're not able to write yet, or right now, like we're using a lot of computers, so they might not understand how to use a keyboard yet. And so typing the words is a big task for them. So they're able to click on their friend's response and then do a video response of, oh, I agree that compose means to put together, or decompose means to break apart. Or in reading, I agree that the characters are Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf, depending on whatever book you were doing. So I think that one is super awesome, especially when you have virtual kiddos and face-to-face kiddos. Your face-to-face kiddos can do it during the school day, and they can respond to it. And then you can have your virtual kiddos, if they're logging on during the school day, or even they can hop on at 5:30 at night, see their friends' responses, and they can respond to their friends. So it also is building like a classroom community, which I find really important. And it's really difficult right now thinking all of your kids together. So it's kind of bringing your classroom together and allowing them to respond to each other. And then your friends at school are like, oh, we have more friends in our class. Different ways that I use FlipGrid in my classroom is FlipGrid Friday. So my district adopted Seesaw for K through 2 to use as our learning management system for this school year, since we are doing asynchronous learning. So our virtual, I even use it in face-to-face because we have like a blended model. So all of my kiddos use Seesaw. So on Friday, I allow them to go on FlipGrid to show me an understanding of the topic that we talked about that week. And so it gives them something to look forward to. And they're like, oh, we don't have to use Seesaw today. Like, we get to use something else. I do assign it on Seesaw just because my kids know how to get to Seesaw, and then they can click on the link and log in. Just because that's an easy way, and that's something my kids have embedded in them, and it's a routine. So they just automatically do it. We know we go to Seesaw, and then we click on our activity. So I pose a question or a discussion, and then the kids can respond to it, practicing using the sentence stems that we've practiced during whole group. So like the characters are, you can compose the number by, we did shapes. The triangle has this many vertices and this many sides. So I can go back and check, did you understand what the shape was, or did you understand this? And plus it's super fun watching your kids like do it on their own. And so that's like taking ownership of their learning. So you can see how they're responding to it. And then of course, students being able to respond to each other. I haven't gotten to that point yet with my kiddos because I'm just trying to still teach them how to use FlipGrid on their own. And then once we've mastered how to use FlipGrid, then we can introduce how to respond to each other. So it can be practiced during small group, and it can be practiced during whole group. So those are just different ways that I've used it, or I am using it. And that there's all different reasons why. So before we get on to the next part, I just want to make sure there aren't any questions about using FlipGrid or other things. Make sure we're okay with that.
Hello, Elizabeth. So we did have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay, so how do you provide feedback to your students' FlipGrid videos?
So there is a teacher you can type. I'm not sure if I can record onto my students' videos. I haven't discovered that yet, but you can, when you click on the student video, there is a part where you can type in a comment for your students.
All right, thank you.
Of course. All right, so now we are going to go into the part where we're going to talk about how to create a FlipGrid. So this is where it would be helpful if you do have a second device handy. You can follow in on the steps. FlipGrid can be accessed through an internet site, and then there are also apps, or an app for FlipGrid. I have noticed that FlipGrid does not like to work on some of the older iPads. So if you have a newer iPad, you can download the app for that and use it on a newer iPad, but it works just as fine on a netbook or a desk or a computer that has camera access. So when you go to FlipGrid, you'll be just on their homepage, and you can sign up for an educator account. You can use either, sorry, I'm already logged in as me, so let me log out so I can actually show you. There we go. So you can create an account. Our school district we have Google logins, or you even have a Microsoft login, where you can create an account just with a username or an email and a password. So our district has Google accounts, so I'm just going to log in with my Google account. And then you'll be given a discussion page. So the idea of FlipGrid is you have a topic, so like an overarching topic like math, reading, science, social studies. So our major subjects. And then when you create a topic or a group, they've renamed it to group, you can create smaller topics or smaller grids under each topic. So, well, it's group and topic now. So you create your group. So you would create a group, you just name it. So I'll just name it topic 1 for an example. And it'll give it a class code or a group code, or if you want the kids to see the whole group of topics. You can give it a new name, but it automatically like pre-generates to a code that will give it to the whole group. And then this is where I create it. I change it to make it easier for my kiddos to log in. So if your students have a Google Gmail account or even a Microsoft account, you can use that and type in the domain. So our domain for our students is at pasadenaisd.net, or sorry, .org, my apologies, .org. And so if you chose this, you could hit next, and then you would type in the domain that you want your like any email that gets put into this group, or when they go to log in, if it shows up pasadenaisd.org, it would allow them to log into that. So, but what I do for my kiddos, because they're younger and it's really difficult for them to learn Shift 2 for @ and just that's a lot to type in, especially when they're learning how to use a keyboard. I go to a student username, and then you type in a student's name. So just Johnny sample. And then you can create a username for them, which would be, I use my kids' student ID numbers, and I've created a login card for them. So it has the FlipGrid logo on it, and then their name, and then their ID number on it, because they're already learning how their numbers, and so like practicing putting in the ID, they can match up the numbers. And plus, when they get older, they'll need to know their ID for lots of things anyway. But if that's a little too much for your kiddos, you can create a different username for them to sign in at. They all have to be different. Every kiddo in your class has to have a different username so that FlipGrid or that response is linked to that student. So I'm just going to add is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you can add a student. You can add all of your students that you want using that grid. So then I hit next. And then I just skip that. And then you can go to your group. So now you have a group. And now you can add your topics that you want in that specific group. So if you looked back at my other page, I had like math, and then I had all my math SEs is what we call them, student expectations, or your TEKS, or your whichever responses you want them to use, you can add that to this topic. So in this topic, I'm going to add one, and I'm going to name this Getting to Know You. Okay, so in this grid, I'm going to have them record a response telling me things about themselves. So then you're going to do a prompt. You're going to type in a prompt. So if you have older kids, they can read it, but something also that's awesome about FlipGrid is when this is posted to the students, there will be a little mic tool that they can press on, and it will read it to them. It'll read the prompt to them. So tell me something about yourself, okay? You can change the recording time. If they're just now getting used to FlipGrid, you can have them create longer videos or have them a longer time to respond. Or if you just want like a super quick response, you can create a shorter time. So it automatically defaults to 1.5 minutes. There is a captions option that you can add, and then you can add pictures or a video. So if you wanted to record yourself kind of doing the FlipGrid for them, you can click on record a video, or if there's like a mini lesson that you want to record and put it on the FlipGrid and then have them respond to it. You can upload videos that you already have made, a YouTube video if there's like an awesome video. When I did my shapes one, I put on the shapes video that I always play for my kids so that they can relate it. And then I typed in what I wanted them to respond to. You can upload an image if you just want an image. There's just a bunch of different things you can add to the FlipGrid to help with how you want your students to respond. So you just pick one, you can play around with them, and different things you can link. And then you can create your topic, and now you have a topic. So when the students log in, let's see if it'll let me do this. So I'm going to click on where it's the join the code, where it says view as a student. And this is where the student, so this is the page when you click your share link. Here, I'll go back. So when you go to share, there's this link right here. So this is what I copy and add as a link on my Seesaw, and the kids click on that so that they just go to this page. So there's no typing in URL addresses. Again, my students and mine, that's a lot of typing. And so I wanted it as simple as possible and to get to where they needed to be. So they'll get to this page. So the one student I added to this response was my Johnny. So I'm going to type in his password that I created for him, and we're going to hit go. So this is the page that the students would see when they log into FlipGrid after they've logged in. So this is the little microphone tool that I was talking about that they can click on if you want them to, if they need to be read to them, this prompt read to them, where it says, tell me about yourself. They can click on this little blue dot and it will read the prompt to them. You will have to kind of teach them, though, that when they click on that, it'll go kind of to another page. So it'll read their response to them or the prompt to them, and then you'll just have to teach them to click on the arrow so that they can go back to their response page. And then they will, when they are here, they can click on the little glowy video camera, and then that's where they can record their response at. So they click on that, and then they would see a picture of themselves. I always call this their selfie screen. I'm like, especially when we're logging into different things that have camera views. I was like, do you see your selfie screen? And this is where they would go. And I was like, do you see it? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, so you're in the right place. And then they just record after they've listened to the prompt. They will click on the recording, and it will start to record, and it'll count down up at the top. So our prompt was, tell me something about yourself. And so I'd be like, my name is Miss Clark, and I have 2 cats at home. Then you just kind of have to teach them to, you have to teach them to click on the little arrows, and then it'll have their name up here, and then it'll submit. One thing I do for my kiddos is anything I have them do, I always do it myself to show them that it's important. Okay, so before I give an assignment to my kiddos, I always do it first so that they can see, oh, so Miss Clark thinks this is important, so she's doing it herself. So now I know that it's important because my teacher is doing it. So, and it's also fun for them to see me do silly things to respond to. But that is just a very basic walkthrough of how to create a FlipGrid. There's a bunch of different little things that you can do when you're creating a topic, or even creating a group, creating your group, and then creating a topic. One thing I did discover when I was doing this with my kiddos is when you are creating topics, you have to make sure that every one of your kiddos is added to every one of your topics. So if you had multiple groups, you have to add each kiddo in your class to each topic. So to do that, if you just added one student at the very beginning, you can go to Actions and Edit Topic. Or no, not topic. I'm sorry. Go back. You want to go to your group edit. So you go to Edit Group, and it says Add Students. Then you can add more students. So sample Sally, and then her code can be 54321. Okay. Again, just make sure all of your students have different login codes or usernames. If you think that typing in a username for every single, for some of your kiddos, if logging in using a username might be a little too difficult for them, you can print out a QR code for that student for that topic. So that's super important to know. That's not their one login card. For every single topic that you create that you add that student to, if typing in a number is difficult for them, then you're going to want, you're going to have to print out a QR code for every single topic that you create for that student. Because again, I was trying to find, an easier way for my kiddos to log in. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, a QR code. They use QR codes for ClassLink. They already know how to scan them. This is awesome, right? And so I went to click on it to print out a QR code for them, but it's only assigned to that topic or that group. So you'll just have to decide what is going to be easiest for you. Are you going to want, if it's just one kiddo and you're going to want to do that and print out every single topic that you create and say, okay, this is your topic for today, and have them do that, then it's always just what's best for your students and what is best for you. That's all what it's always boiled down to. I've been slowly showing my kiddos how to log in. And so my kids are doing just fine, learning how to match their numbers and typing in their ID number for each of the topics. So just play around with FlipGrid. I mean, it's a great tool if you have something and you just want something a little different. I was nervous about FlipGrid again, but I've been seeing my kids, and my kids just think it's so much fun. So I've seen them flip over it. But that is just kind of so that is FlipGrid and how I use it in my classroom and how to create one. So that's where I'm going to end it there. And if we have any other questions, I'll be happy to try and answer those for you.
Awesome. So we actually do have quite a few questions, and I'm excited to see your answer. So the first one, we'll go easy. We'll start easy for you. So can you use FlipGrid with the Chromebooks?
My students don't have Chromebooks, so I haven't tried to use it, but it says it can be used with a lot of things, a lot of different what do they call it, like processing systems, and my kids log on using through Chrome, so I don't use Microsoft Edge or Firefox or anything with my kiddos. We go specifically through Chrome, so I can think that it probably does work on a Chromebook.
Okay, and I have another question for you. Are you able to download the FlipGrid videos? For instance, if a teacher wanted to use them for an end of the year portfolio, is it possible to download those?
Yes, it is absolutely possible to download them. That's actually how I have my little videos on there. Is I went onto FlipGrid, and I downloaded my student responses. These couple little responses. So the only thing I did have to do so I could put it on the presentation was put it on YouTube, because it wasn't compatible with Google Slides. But that was the only little thing I had to do for that. But if you wanted to create a virtual portfolio for your kiddos, or just put it on Google Drive to save it for your kiddos, you can definitely download the videos from FlipGrid.
Okay. And we have, okay, so the questions are popping up here now. I'll go a little quicker. Okay, so can I mass import student information, or do I have to import students' information one by one? There
is a Excel sheet that when you go to add your students, it says like CSV or something like that, and you're supposed to be able to type in all of your students' first names, all of your students' last names, and then whatever code you want them to use. I haven't quite figured out how to do it yet, so I am totally willing to figure out how to. I just haven't yet.
Okay, and another question that I see here is, will your PowerPoint be accessible?
I don't know. If there's any way I can attach it somewhere so it is, I would graciously share it with y'all. I don't know about that.
Okay. And just want to put a little plug there. Remember that we can always utilize Twitter. So of course, I'm sure you all have enjoyed this session. So make sure you go on Twitter. And then also, Elizabeth, you can link a bit.ly link if you feel comfortable with sharing your presentation, and you can drop it into Twitter. So make sure you all go and give her a follow.
All right, well, are there any additional questions at this time? Any other ones? Go ahead and drop them in if you prefer, if you like to. We have words of wisdom from Elizabeth Clark. And so with her being the FlipGrid guru, we want to be able to address your questions that you may have at this time. So if you've got them, go ahead and pop them in.
And then I also added this. So if you do end up having any additional questions later that come up while you're playing with your FlipGrid, this is my email, eclark@pasadenaisd.org. I mean, again, I am a classroom teacher, and this year is crazy, but I will definitely get to your questions as quickly and as efficiently as I can. And then, of course, that is my Twitter. And you can always reach out to me either of those ways, and I would love to help you out. And if you ever find any tips and tricks that you find helpful with your kiddos using FlipGrid, I am always willing to learn and try with mine too. So we're all teachers, we'll all collaborate together, and we learn from each other. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So thank you, Elizabeth. This concludes this session. And so we have new sessions that are starting every hour. And so make sure that you are checking on the schedule for all of the amazing sessions that we have. Okay. And so you'll be receiving an email, and you'll need the password. Aha, the one down here. So session 2 is certificate password is, and it is learn. By the way, it is case sensitive. It is case sensitive. So again, for session 2, the certificate password is learn. And so I do want to thank you, Elizabeth, one more time. And I do want to thank you, Tashika, for being our awesome co-host. And most importantly, Elizabeth, for you being our presenter. I really do appreciate the way in which you are engaging your students, engaging this new digital norm. And so I appreciate you being on the front lines and doing what's best for kids. And I appreciate you doing it in an innovative way with using FlipGrid. And so I also want to thank those who are live with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for tuning in to TCCA 2020. And I hope this has helped you fine tune your digital focus and engagement. And so thank you so much, guys. Thank you. By the way, y'all better follow Elizabeth.